السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. عنوان البحث أنا زي طبعا مع
So,
النظرية
as you said, the topic of my presentation is the security of countries during transitional periods. I don't need to introduce myself. Let's start with the problem itself. So one example is this. During crises, decisions have to be decisive. They need to be absolute. Of course, in crises, we always have internal and external crises, and internal ones are usually related to politics and economy and illiteracy, poverty. These could be some of the reasons behind an international crisis. There could also be a natural crisis that are also included as an internal one. But the reasons behind international crises are different. It can lead from energy, other unfair distribution of resources, and also the conflicts between states and the possibility of conflict between states could be some of these reasons. And we experience many international problems in the world right now, and there are a variety of ways to solve them, usually by way of negotiation or intimidation or sanctions. And this is how the crises are managed. Early detection is very important. And then we have to develop various strategies and scenarios. Then we have to face the crisis itself, and we have to be able to take the necessary steps to prevent the crisis from seeping into other fields. But unfortunately, it is not possible to solve them with conventional methods. First, we have to identify them using scientific methods, and we need people to be able to cope with them, and we have to have open communication channels. So what kind of steps do we need to take in case of a crisis? First, we have to protect lives and goods and also documents, and we have to muster strength. And we shouldn't fall into hopelessness, and we need to make sure that we keep all the communication channels open. Some other things that I would like to list are as follows. We need to have a certain framework as to how to manage this crisis. We need economic support, because in international relations, economics is a very important element. There could be psychological wars, and in that case, press and media are very important, and we need a certain framework within which press can operate. So the occupation of states, there are usually interim governments replaced, and this happened during the Arab Spring, as you know. These were great protests against leaders, and at the political levels and the press levels, many crises actually erupted during the Arab Spring, and it wasn't dealt with in the national and the international platform. And Arab Spring took place in a lot of countries and it impacted the entire world. As you know, in our region, we have problems in the distribution of resources. And there is some uncertainty about the distribution of these resources. So that's why we need a joint security strategy.
الأمم المتحدة في المحافظة على مبادئها وعدم قدرتها على حل الأزمات التي تصنعها الدول الكبرى. وما زالت أمريكا وروسيا.
And we know that United Nations have some documents about this, and we know that this is actually a proof as to how the United Nations failed in fulfilling its mission. So one thing about Russia is that, as you know, Russia wants to reinstate Soviet Union, and it has very strong political ties with European countries. And as you know, the US is frightened that it will lose its influence over Europe, and it goes into wars outside of its own country. And US has a policy which is not a new one.
وضمان عدم تحالفها مع السعودية وتركيا وباكستان ضد الهيمنة الأمريكية. أمريكا وبريطانيا تدعمان أوكرانيا عسكرياً لتظل الحرب مشتعلة رغم دعوات تركيا لوقف الحرب وحل الصراع سياسياً لتخرج أمريكا.
So it tries to resist the rising power of Iran and other countries, and it tries to prevent Russia from gaining influence over these countries to stand against Russia. Because we know that Russia is another very important threat, and the Islamic world might actually face another powerful force, which is Russia. So in this region, there are a lot of countries that actually influence. So we have Europe, we have the US, we have Russia. So what Islamic countries need to do? We need to take Turkey as an example. Turkey is a sovereign country, and it is getting stronger every passing day. In terms of defense industries, for example, Turkey is a leading country. And we know that many other countries actually purchase defense systems from Turkey. So a few more things that I would like to add is that so the wars in Syria, in Iraq, and are actually approaching the borders of Turkey. As you know, Iran occupied Iraq for a while, and that's why they actually want to give the wars in Syria and in Iraq as a disguise. But we don't want any wars in these countries. We want to have good neighborly relations with our countries, with our brothers and sisters.
التقسيم في مقابل
So the conflict in Syria is actually a competition, basically a competition between the US and Russia, and they want to destabilize Afghanistan. And we know that these big powers, these major powers, are actually financing the wars in Syria and in Afghanistan. Same goes for Iran as well. We know that it is possible that militia could be formed in Iran. So what to do to resolve crises? I would like to point out a few issues. So we need to do our best to solve a crisis, and we need to support the leading forces, and we need to do our best, and we need to develop relevant tools and instruments. And the biggest instrument there is press and the media. So we need to make sure that we have control over the media, because that is the most important tool in a crisis. So in order to succeed, we need reasonable solutions. So after the Hudaybiyah agreement, Prophet Abu Jandar came up with these such reasonable solutions. And we need to have a similar approach. For example, Turkey signed an agreement with Russia and Iran, and as a result, the Syrian opposition actually reduced conflicts in the country, and also Russia came up with some conditions, and Turkey took some very important steps as well to keep the conflict away from its borders. So Turkey also kicked off operations and did its best to secure civilians.
المكائد والعصبيات واليهود الذين يبيعون السلاح لكل الأطراف المتحاربة لجني الأموال والسيطرة على اقتصاد الدولة، وهذا يتطلب أولاً تحديد الفئات
as you know, we can give examples from the disagreements in Medina. The situation in Medina, in the city, was not ideal, and there are organizations that sell weapons to every side that are battling, and Prophet Muhammad actually took great measures to prevent that. So this is quite an important examples that we can also follow. And during the Battle of the Trench, the parties actually did not stick to the agreement. So that's why we definitely need to make sure that we follow the agreements, we stick to them. This is definitely one of the most important rules that we need to take into consideration. And the case of Hudaybiyah is very important. Hudaybiyah ceasefire agreement was a 10-year ceasefire agreement. Signed between Prophet Muhammad and the kings of that time. Of course, back in those days, some parties did not stick to the agreement. And Prophet Muhammad actually rejected the mediation of his uncle. But of course, we know that due to this agreement, Muslims were actually pressurized, was pressured to go to Medina. And in that case, this example is very important because this was a time when Muslims actually came up with quite positive solutions. So this is an important example by in Quraysh, we know that they actually found the vulnerabilities of enemies. So the conquering of Mecca
تملك كل الأسلحة ضد الشعوب العزل من السلاح. ثم جاءت مؤتة وتبوك تدريبا عمليا لمواجهة.
So today, none of these principles are actually implemented today. So after the conquest of Mecca, we were faced with a crossroads. And in order for Islam to go back to those times, we need to take important decisions. We need to be resolute. So after the passing of Prophet Muhammad, Prophet Abu Bakr told everyone that if you are a servant to Prophet Muhammad, then Prophet Muhammad has passed away. But if you are a servant to Allah, then Allah is immortal. So this is an important crossroads, and this was an important challenge before Muslims, which brought about the selection of the new caliph. Here we know how important the contributions were of people from Medina who helped Muslims who immigrated there, and they supported Prophet Abu Bakr, and after that he was declared the caliph, because they knew that a state should not be left without a leader. And at the same time, he was appointed as caliph only a day after the passing of Prophet Muhammad. And for example, we left Egypt without a president for many, many years. So we don't have a president right now. We have a country that is actually administered by the US. And a leader should have wisdom, should have reason. A leader has to take proper decisions. The leader has to be wise and act with reason. So we know that the caliphate of Prophet Abu Bakr only lasted for a few months, but in those few times he did so many things that we can take example of. So after that, there were many kingdoms and many empires established. The assassination of Shah Turan is a very important example for us. And from 648 to 670, this continued. And with regards to the Angeluk battle, we know that El-Mansur Nureddin, the head of, who was leading the army of Egypt, actually decided to dismiss the king of Egypt, and he established a consultation board, and he established the Maliki kingdom. Ain Jalut here emphasized the importance of people, and he himself set a great example of how important that people should keep on serving Allah. So these are important examples that we need to follow even today. So the Islamic world is in the middle of conflicts and crises. And the Islamic world, Islamic countries need to take important steps to prevent the entire world from going into destruction. We need to take steps to stop the war in Ukraine. The US should actually return the funds that it froze back to Afghanistan, and the US need to prevent its oppression on Islamic countries, and we have a lot of responsibility in that as well. The US need to stop supporting the armed militia in Syria, and it needs to respect the sovereignty of these countries. And the US also fires a lot of conflict within countries. So it actually triggers sectarian conflicts in countries. US need to stop doing that, and we need to have respect towards the sovereignty and territorial integrity of other countries. We know the great history of Islamic countries. So this is actually out of my research, but I have one recommendation about education. We need to improve our curricula in Islamic countries. So we need to make use of technology as well. Thank you.